Sometimes the people you save are the ones you should fear the most. She stopped in the rain.
Sometimes the people you save are the ones you should fear the most. The rain started as a whisper against my windshield, then turned into something heavier, something relentless, the kind of storm that made the whole city feel like it was holding its breath, and I tightened my grip on the steering wheel as Max shifted in the passenger seat, his low growl barely audible over the hum of the engine, while Lily slept curled up in the back, her small hand still clutching the edge of her worn pink blanket, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored in a world that never seemed to slow down for us. And I checked the clock glowing on the dashboard. 11:47 p.m. Later than I ever wanted to be out with her, but double shifts didn't care about what I wanted, and neither did the bills stacked on my kitchen counter waiting for me at home. The kind of bills that didn't give second chances, the kind that reminded you every single day how close you were to losing everything. And I exhaled slowly, trying to push the exhaustion out of my chest, trying to focus on the road slick with rain reflecting the streetlights and long, distorted streaks that made everything feel unreal, like I was driving through a painting that hadn't quite dried yet. When Max suddenly sat upright, his ears sharp, his body going rigid in a way I had learned not to ignore. "What is it, boy?" I murmured, glancing at him. But he was already staring out the window, a soft but urgent whine slipping from his throat as we passed a narrow side street I would have normally ignored, and something in my chest tightened, that instinct every parent learns to trust even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's inconvenient. And before I could talk myself out of it, I slowed the car, tires hissing against the wet asphalt as I turned into the alley, the headlights cutting through the darkness. Just enough to reveal shapes, dumpsters, broken pavement, shadows that stretched too long. And then I saw it, a wheelchair tilted at an angle near the far wall, one wheel still slowly spinning like it had been disturbed moments ago, and my breath caught as Max let out a sharp bark, the kind he only used when something was wrong, really wrong. And I felt it then, that shift in the air, that quiet tension that made the back of my neck prickle as I parked the car, my heart beating a little faster than it should have. "Stay here," I whispered, glancing back at Lily to make sure she was still asleep, her chest rising and falling steadily, safe for now, before I pushed the door open and stepped out into the rain, cold soaking through my jacket instantly as I moved closer, each step echoing too loud in the silence until I saw him, half-shadowed against the brick wall, sitting in that wheelchair like he had been left behind by the world itself, his head slightly lowered, dark hair damp from the rain, clothes too expensive for this place, for this moment, and even from a few feet away, I could tell he didn't belong here. Not like this, not helpless, not abandoned, and I hesitated, just for a second, because something about him didn't feel right. Not dangerous exactly, but controlled, like even now, even like this, he wasn't entirely vulnerable. And then his eyes lifted to meet mine, sharp, steady, aware in a way that sent a strange chill through me despite the rain, and my voice came out softer than I expected. "Are you okay?" And for a moment, he didn't answer, just watched me like he was measuring something I couldn't see, something I didn't understand, before he finally spoke, low, calm, like the storm didn't touch him at all. "No," he said, and something in the way he said it made my chest tighten, not because he sounded afraid, but because he didn't, because whatever had happened to him, whatever had brought him here, it hadn't taken that edge from him, that quiet authority that didn't match the wheelchair, didn't match the situation, didn't match anything that made sense. And I swallowed, glancing back toward my car, toward my sleeping daughter, toward the life I had barely managed to keep together, and I knew I should leave. I knew this wasn't my problem, that I didn't have the luxury of getting involved in things I didn't understand. But Max stepped closer to him, tail low but not tucked, watching him like he had already decided something I hadn't yet, and I exhaled slowly, shaking my head at myself as I stepped forward. "I can't just leave you here," I said, more to myself than to him. And that was the moment everything changed, even if I didn't know it yet. I should have asked more questions, but I did not, because something about the way he looked at me made questions feel useless. like he already knew what I would ask and had already decided what he would answer. And I hated that feeling, the quiet shift of control that I could not explain. So instead I focused on what I could control, on the cold rain soaking through my sneakers, on the weight of responsibility sitting heavy in my chest as I moved behind the wheelchair and tested the handles. Steady, solid, expensive, not the kind of thing you just leave behind in an alley unless something had gone very wrong. I have a car, I said, keeping my voice firm. Practical, the same tone I used at the diner when things got chaotic, when I needed to keep everything from falling apart. I can take you somewhere safe. And there it was again, that pause, that brief silence where he studied me like I was the one out of place, like I was the unpredictable variable, before he gave a small nod. Not grateful, not relieved, just accepting, like this was a decision he had already made before I even spoke, and it unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. But I pushed it aside and started guiding the wheelchair toward my car, Max walking close at his side, alert but calm, like he had already decided this man was not a threat, which should have comforted me more than it did, because Max was never wrong about people, never, and yet something in my chest still felt tight, still felt uncertain, like I was stepping into something I could not see yet, something bigger than a late-night rescue. And I opened the back door carefully, glancing at Lily, who stirred slightly but did not wake, her soft breathing steady, trusting, and I felt that familiar pull, that fierce need to protect her from anything that could disrupt the fragile peace I had built for us, even if that meant turning away from a stranger in need, even if that meant ignoring whatever instinct had brought me into that alley. In the first place, but it was too late for that now. So I helped him adjust, his movements controlled despite the situation, no wasted energy, no hesitation, like he was used to adapting, used to surviving. And when his hand briefly brushed against mine, it was warm, steady, not weak, not fragile, and I noticed it immediately. The strength there, the quiet certainty that did not match the wheelchair at all. And my eyes flicked up to his, catching that same unreadable expression as before, and for a second, the world narrowed, just the two of us standing in the rain, something unspoken passing between us that I could not name. And then Max nudged my leg, breaking the moment, grounding me, reminding me of what mattered. So I stepped back quickly and closed the door, moving to the driver's seat with a breath I did not realize I had been holding, the engine humming to life as I pulled away from the alley, leaving behind the spinning wheel, the shadows, the part of my life that had felt simple just minutes ago. And I kept my eyes on the road, on the reflections of streetlights stretching across the wet pavement, on anything but the man in my back seat who sat in silence, watching everything, missing nothing, until finally his voice came again, low, controlled. You have a child. Not a question, a statement, and I tightened my grip on the wheel, a flicker of defensiveness rising instinctively. Yes, I said, glancing at him briefly in the rearview mirror, catching the way his gaze had already shifted to Lily, assessing, protective in a way that did not make sense, not for a stranger, not for someone I had just pulled out of an alley. And then he looked back at me, and there was something different in his eyes now, something sharper, more focused, like a decision had just been made. You should not have stopped tonight, he said quietly, and a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain, because it did not sound like a warning, it sounded like a truth I was only beginning to understand. I should have laughed it off, should have told him he was overthinking, that people help people, and that was all there was to it. But the way he said it stayed with me, settled somewhere deep in my chest like a warning I did not know how to interpret, and I forced my eyes back to the road, watching the red glow of a traffic light reflect across the rain-soaked pavement as I slowed the car to a stop, the windshield wipers moving in steady rhythm, back and forth, like they were trying to clear more than just water. Well, I said after a moment, my voice quieter than before, I did stop. So now what? And there was a faint shift behind me, the subtle sound of fabric as he adjusted in the seat, controlled, precise, like everything he did. And when I glanced in the mirror again, he was watching the street, not me, his gaze moving from one passing car to another with a focus that felt deliberate, calculated, like he was tracking patterns I could not see. Now, he said, his tone even. You take me somewhere no one would think to look, and a small, humorless laugh escaped me before I could stop it, because that was not something a normal person said. not something someone stranded in an alley at midnight should be thinking about. I live in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. I replied, shaking my head slightly. Trust me, no one is looking there. And for the first time, something almost like approval flickered across his expression, subtle but unmistakable, and it sent an unexpected warmth through me that I did not trust, not even a little, because I had spent too many years learning not to rely on approval from men who carried control in their silence. And I tightened my grip on the wheel again, focusing on the familiar streets as I turned onto Maple Avenue, the neon glow of the laundromat sign flickering ahead like a beacon I had never thought of as anything more than home until now, until tonight, until everything felt just slightly off, just slightly shifted, and I parked in my usual spot, engine idling for a second longer than necessary as I sat there, listening to the rain, feeling the weight of what I had done settle over me. Because bringing a stranger into my home was not just a risk, it was a decision that could change everything. And I turned slightly in my seat, meeting his gaze fully for the first time since we left the alley. I have rules, I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty threading through me. You stay quiet. You do not wake my daughter, and whatever trouble you are in does not follow you inside. And he held my gaze, unblinking, like he was measuring the boundaries I was setting, testing them without moving an inch, before he gave a single nod. Understood, he said. And there was something about the way he said it that made it feel less like agreement and more like a promise on his own terms, and I did not like how that made my heart beat just a little faster. So I broke eye contact first, stepping out into the rain and moving quickly to open the back door, helping him maneuver the wheelchair with careful precision, aware of every small detail, the weight of it, the smoothness of its movement, the quiet efficiency that spoke of something far from ordinary, and Max stayed close, his body brushing lightly against my leg as if reminding me he was there, as if reminding me I was not alone. And together we made our way toward the narrow staircase leading up to my apartment, the flickering hallway light casting long shadows against the walls. And as I reached for the door, keys cold in my hand, I felt it again, that shift in the air, that subtle tension that did not belong to me. And I turned my head instinctively, scanning the empty street behind us. Rain falling steady. No movement. No sound except the distant hum of traffic. And yet, something did not feel empty at all. And when I looked back at him, his gaze was already fixed in that same direction, sharp, alert, like he saw it too, like whatever had followed him into that alley had not stayed there. And his voice came low, almost a whisper this time. We are not alone. My fingers tightened around the keys as his words settled into the space between us, heavy and immediate. And for a second I told myself he was wrong, that this was just nerves, just the kind of fear that comes from stepping outside your routine, from bringing a stranger home in the middle of the night. But Max did not move, did not relax, his body still tense at my side, his eyes fixed on the far end of the street where the shadows stretched just a little too long under the flickering streetlight. And I felt it then, that quiet shift in my chest, that instinct that had made me turn into the alley in the first place, the one I could not ignore no matter how much I wanted to. Get inside, I said quickly, my voice lower now, sharper, as I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The familiar creak of the hinges louder than usual in the silence, and I guided the wheelchair forward, my movements faster than before, more deliberate, like I was racing something I could not see. And once we were inside, I shut the door firmly behind us, sliding the lock into place with a solid click that should have made me feel better, but did not. Not entirely. Because whatever had followed us was not something a simple lock could stop, and I stood there for a second, listening. The faint hum of the laundromat machines below, the steady rhythm of rain against the windows. No footsteps, no voices, nothing that confirmed what we both felt. And yet the air still carried that tension, that quiet awareness that we were not as alone as we should have been. And I turned back to him, my heart still beating faster than normal. You said they would not look here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to keep control of a situation that was already slipping beyond what I understood. And he met my gaze without hesitation, his expression calm, composed, like this was not new to him. Like this was something he had lived through before. I said they would not think to look here, he corrected gently, and something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten, because there was a difference, a very real difference. and I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my damp hair as I stepped further into the apartment, the small space suddenly feeling smaller, more fragile, like the walls that had always kept us safe were not as strong as I had believed. Stay here, I said, nodding toward the living room. I need to check on Lily, and without waiting for a response, I moved down the short hallway, my steps quiet out of habit, pushing open her bedroom door. Just enough to see her curled up under her blanket, still asleep, her soft breathing steady, untouched by the tension that had followed us home, and relief washed over me, sharp and immediate, grounding me in what mattered most. And I stepped inside for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from her face, letting myself breathe, just for a second, before I heard it, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a car engine slowing outside, tires rolling over wet pavement, and my head snapped up, every muscle in my body going still as I listened, the engine idling for a second too long, the kind of pause that did not belong to someone just passing by. And I moved back into the living room quickly, my voice low, urgent. "There is a car," I said, and he was already looking toward the window, his posture different now, sharper, more alert, like the quiet man from before had been replaced by someone else entirely, someone who understood this moment in a way I did not, and he did not ask questions, did not hesitate, just spoke with calm certainty that cut through the tension like a blade. "Turn off the lights." I did not argue, did not question it, because something in his voice made it clear this was not a suggestion, and my hand moved automatically, reaching for the switch by the door and flipping it down as the room fell into darkness, the soft glow from the streetlights outside barely slipping through the edges of the curtains. And for a moment, everything felt too still, too quiet, like the world had paused just long enough for something to catch up. And I could hear it now, the faint hum of that engine outside, steady, patient, not the sound of someone lost or passing through, but someone waiting, and my pulse quickened as I stepped back instinctively, my shoulder brushing against the wall as I tried to adjust to the dim light. "What is happening?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, because even speaking felt like it might draw attention, like sound itself could betray us. And he did not answer right away, his gaze fixed on the window, his body angled slightly, as if he was listening to something beyond what I could hear, beyond what I could understand. And then he spoke, calm, measured, like he had already mapped out the next 10 steps ahead of us. "They are confirming," he said quietly, and that single word made my chest tighten, because it implied planning, intention, something far more serious than I wanted to believe. And I shook my head slightly, trying to push back against the rising fear. "Confirming what?" I asked, but he only glanced at me briefly, his expression unreadable. "Whether I am here," he said, and the simplicity of it made it worse, made it real in a way I could not ignore anymore. And before I could respond, Max moved closer to me, his body pressing against my leg, a low, protective rumble building in his chest as his eyes stayed locked on the door, and I followed his gaze, my breath catching as the faint shadow of movement passed under the thin line of light at the bottom, subtle, quick, but enough to send a chill down my spine. And instinctively I took a step back, my mind racing, calculating distances, exits, options, the way I always did when something felt off, when something threatened the fragile safety I had built for Lily and me. And I turned toward the hallway, toward her room, my voice tight but steady. "I need to get her," I said, already moving. But his voice stopped me before I took more than 2 steps. "Wait," he said, low but firm, and something in it made me freeze, made me turn back despite every instinct telling me to run to my daughter, to protect her first, always first. And he held my gaze, his eyes sharp, focused, like he was balancing something I could not see. "If you move now, they will know exactly where you are," he continued, and I hated that it made sense. Hated that I had to stand there and do nothing while fear pressed against my ribs, making it hard to breathe, and my hands curled into fists at my sides as I forced myself to stay still, to trust a man I did not know in a situation I did not understand. And the seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last, until the engine outside finally shifted, the sound of tires rolling slowly across wet pavement breaking the silence as the car began to move again, not fast, not rushed, just a quiet departure that felt anything but harmless. And I exhaled a breath I did not realize I had been holding, my shoulders dropping slightly as the tension in the room eased just enough for me to think again, to move again, and I turned back to him, my voice sharper now, edged with something stronger than fear, something closer to anger. "You need to tell me what is going on," I said, because whatever this was, whatever had followed him into my life, I was already in it, already part of it, and I was not going to stand in the dark of my own home without answers, not when my daughter was just down the hall, not when everything I had worked to protect was suddenly at risk. And he watched me for a moment, really watched me this time, like he was reassessing something, recalculating. Before he finally spoke, his voice steady but carrying a weight that settled into the room with quiet certainty. "You brought me into your home," he said, "which means they will not stop looking." And my stomach dropped as the truth of it hit me, heavy and unavoidable. And then he added, softer this time, but no less final, "And now, neither can I." The words settled into me slowly, like cold water seeping through cracks I did not know existed. And for a second I just stood there, staring at him in the dim light, trying to understand how a single decision, one turn into a dark alley, had rewritten the rules of my entire life in less than an hour. And I felt it then, that sharp edge of fear turning into something else, something steadier, something that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the small room down the hall where my daughter slept. "No," I said quietly, shaking my head as I stepped closer, my voice gaining strength with every word. "You do not get to decide that for me." And his eyes shifted slightly, not surprised, not offended, just attentive, like he had been waiting to see if I would push back. And I did, because I had spent too many years fighting to keep a roof over our heads, to keep Lily safe, to let anyone walk into my home and take control without a fight. "You do not get to bring whatever this is into my life and then tell me I have no choice," I continued, my voice low but steady, and Max moved closer beside me, his presence grounding, his quiet strength reminding me I was not as alone as this moment felt. And for a second the room held that tension, that silent standoff between two people who were used to control in very different ways. And then something shifted, subtle but real, in the way he looked at me, like I had just changed something in his calculations. "You are right," he said finally, his tone calm but carrying something new, something that felt almost like respect, and it caught me off guard enough that I blinked, just once, before he continued. "Which is why I am telling you the truth now." And my chest tightened again, because whatever came next was not going to make this easier, not going to undo what had already started, and I crossed my arms instinctively, bracing myself. "Then start talking," I said, and he did not hesitate this time, did not hold back. "The men who were outside," he said, his voice even, controlled, "they are not looking for a stranger in a wheelchair." And a chill ran down my spine as I realized where this was going. As I realized I already knew the answer before he said it. "They are looking for me," he finished, and the room felt smaller somehow, the walls closer, the air heavier, and I exhaled slowly, forcing my mind to stay clear, to stay focused, because panic would not help Lily, panic would not fix this. "Who are you?" I asked, the question coming out quieter than I intended, but no less serious. And for the first time since I had met him, he did not answer immediately, his gaze dropping for just a fraction of a second before returning to mine, steady, unflinching. And when he spoke, there was no hesitation left, no distance, just truth. "My name is Sebastian Hale," he said, and even the way he said it felt different, like the name carried weight on its own, like it meant something beyond what I understood. And I searched his face for recognition, for anything that would explain why that name made the air feel heavier, why it felt like I should know it even if I did not. And then he added, quieter this time, but far more dangerous in its simplicity. "And there are people in this city who would do anything to find me tonight." And my breath caught as the full weight of it settled in, because this was not just about him anymore, not just about whatever world he came from. This was about my home, my daughter, my life. And I felt that shift again, that moment where fear turned into something sharper, something protective, and I straightened slightly, my voice firm despite the storm still echoing outside. "Then you are going to tell me everything I need to know to keep her safe," I said, because whatever he was, whatever this was, there was only one thing that mattered now, and that was making sure Lily never became part of it. His name lingered in the air longer than it should have, like it carried weight I could not see but could feel pressing against everything around us. And I watched him carefully, searching for something that would make sense of it, something that would make this easier to understand. But all I found was that same controlled stillness, that same quiet authority that did not belong in my small apartment. Not in a place where bills were paid late and furniture did not match. And yet he sat there, like he had always been part of the space, like the world outside bent to him even now. And I did not like that, did not trust it, but I did not look away either. Start with why they were outside my door, I said, my voice steady, because I needed facts, needed something solid to hold on to instead of the growing sense that I had stepped into something far bigger than I could manage. And he nodded once, like he respected the directness, like he expected it. There was an arrangement tonight. He began, his tone calm but precise, every word chosen carefully, one that did not go as planned. And I felt my stomach tighten at the understatement, because whatever he meant, it had ended with him alone in an alley and people searching for him in the middle of the night, which meant it was not small, not simple, and definitely not safe. They will assume I am injured, he continued, glancing briefly at the wheelchair. And there was something almost ironic in the way his eyes moved over it, like it was a tool rather than a limitation, which means they will be careful, patient, methodical, and each word felt like another layer settling over me, another piece of a reality I had not asked to be part of, and I crossed my arms tighter, grounding myself in the only thing that mattered. And how long does that last? I asked, because time was something I understood, something I could work with. And he looked at me again, really looked this time, like he was weighing how much to tell me, how much I could handle, before he answered, until they are certain I am either gone or found. And that did not help, did not give me anything I could use, and frustration flared sharp in my chest. That is not an answer, I said, my voice low but firm. And for a second, something flickered in his expression again, not annoyance, not impatience, something closer to recognition, like he understood that I was not going to accept vague reassurances, not when my daughter was involved. Then here is the answer you want, he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice quieter now, but carrying more weight than before. This does not end quickly. And the honesty of it hit harder than anything else he had said, because there was no comfort in it, no attempt to soften the truth, just a clear line drawn through everything I had thought I knew about tonight. And I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay steady, to stay focused, even as the reality of it settled deeper. And from down the hall, I heard a small sound, soft, sleepy, the kind of movement that came before Lily woke up, and my entire body reacted instantly, every thought shifting, every priority snapping back into place. And I turned toward the hallway without thinking, my voice barely above a whisper. She is waking up. And when I looked back at him, something had changed again, something subtle but undeniable, because for the first time since I had met him, his attention was not on the door, not on the window, not on whatever threat waited outside. It was on that hallway, on the space where my daughter slept, and his expression softened just enough to be noticeable, just enough to matter. Then we adjust, he said quietly, and there was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just a calm shift in strategy that felt almost protective. And I did not understand it, did not trust it, but I could not ignore it either, because whatever he was, whatever world he came from, in that moment, he was not looking at Lily like a risk. He was looking at her like something that needed to be kept safe. And I felt that strange shift again, that pull between fear and something else I could not name. And before I could question it, before I could decide what to do with it, Lily's small voice drifted down the hallway, soft and confused, "Mom," and everything else disappeared, because nothing mattered more than answering her. I moved before I even thought, the sound of her voice pulling me down the hallway like gravity, every instinct sharpening into focus as I pushed her door open and found her sitting up in bed, her small frame wrapped in that pink blanket, her eyes heavy with sleep, but searching, always searching for me first. And I softened instantly, the tension in my chest shifting into something gentler as I crossed the room and sat beside her, brushing my hand over her hair. "Hey, baby," I whispered, keeping my voice calm, steady, like nothing had changed, like the world outside our door was still simple and safe, because that was what she needed. That was what I had always given her. "Did I wake you?" she asked softly, her voice small and warm, and I shook my head, offering a faint smile she could feel more than see in the dim light. "No, sweetheart, you are okay. I am right here." And she leaned into me without hesitation, trusting, always trusting, and that trust settled deep in my chest like something I had to protect at all costs, even now, especially now. And behind me I could feel it, his presence at the edge of the hallway, quiet, still, not intruding but not leaving either, and for a second I tensed, instinctively aware of him being so close to her space. But when I glanced over my shoulder, he had stopped at a distance, his posture controlled. His gaze lowered slightly like he understood without being told that this was not his place, not his moment, and something about that made the tightness in my chest ease just a fraction, just enough for me to turn back to Lily. "There is someone here," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, and I froze for half a second, my heart catching before I forced myself to stay calm, to stay steady. "He needed help," I said gently, choosing my words carefully, because children always heard more than you intended, always understood more than you realized, and we are just helping him for a little while. And she was quiet for a moment, processing, her small fingers tightening slightly in my shirt before she nodded against me. "Okay," she said simply, because that was who she was, trusting, open, believing the world was still good even when it tried not to be, and I swallowed against the emotion that rose unexpectedly in my throat, brushing her hair back again as I leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, grounding myself in her warmth, in her presence, in the only thing that truly mattered. And then Max padded into the doorway, his nails soft against the floor as he moved closer, his tail low but wagging slightly, and Lily smiled faintly, reaching out to touch him. "Max says he is not bad," she whispered, and I let out a slow breath I did not realize I had been holding, because if there was one thing I trusted more than my own instincts sometimes, it was Max, and I nodded, more to myself than to her. "Then we will be okay," I said, quietly, even if I was not entirely sure that was true, and behind me, I heard the faint shift of movement again, controlled, deliberate, and I knew he was still there, still watching, still listening, and for the first time, it did not feel like a threat pressing in from the outside. It felt like something else, something quieter, something that had not existed before tonight. And as I helped Lily settle back under her blanket, her breathing slowly evening out again, I stayed there a little longer than necessary, my hand resting lightly against her shoulder, memorizing the calm, holding on to it, because I knew the moment I stepped back into that living room, everything would still be waiting. Everything would still be real. And when I finally stood and turned toward the door, my eyes met his again across the dim hallway. And there was something different there now, something that had shifted without either of us saying a word, and his voice came low, softer than I had heard it before. "She trusts you completely." And I held his gaze, steady despite everything, because that was the one thing I would never let change. "I know," I said quietly, "and I intend to keep it that way." The apartment felt different when I stepped back into the living room, like something invisible had shifted into place, something that could not be undone, and I closed the distance slowly, my eyes never leaving him as he sat there in the dim light, composed, controlled, like the storm outside had nothing to do with him and everything to do with the world trying to catch up. And for the first time since I had brought him here, I realized something that settled deep in my chest with quiet certainty. He was not the kind of man who reacted. He was the kind of man who anticipated, and that realization changed everything, because it meant whatever came next, he was already thinking 3 steps ahead of it. And I crossed my arms again, grounding myself, refusing to let that shift the balance between us more than it already had. "You said this does not end quickly," I began, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment pressing in. "So what happens next?" And he watched me for a second, really watched me, like he was measuring not just the question but the person asking it, before his gaze flicked briefly toward the window, toward the street beyond where the rain still fell in steady lines, and then back to me. "Next," he said quietly, "they will come back." And there was no hesitation in it, no doubt, just a simple statement of fact that sent a slow chill through me, and I exhaled carefully, forcing myself to stay calm, to stay focused, because panic would not protect Lily. Panic would not fix this. "And when they do?" I asked, And he leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed in a way that did not match the situation. Like he was completely at ease, even now, even here. They will expect fear, he said, his tone even. And they will expect mistakes. And his eyes met mine again, sharp, deliberate, which means we give them neither. And something in the way he said we made my chest tighten, because I had not agreed to that, had not agreed to being part of whatever this was. And yet here I was, standing in my own living room, already inside it whether I liked it or not. And I shook my head slightly, a small, almost disbelieving breath leaving me. You keep saying we, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. Like I have already made that choice. And for a moment, the room went still again. That same quiet tension settling between us. But this time it felt different, less like a standoff and more like something being understood without being said. And he did not look away, did not soften what came next. You made it the moment you stopped the car, he replied, calm, unyielding. And I held his gaze, letting the truth of that settle in, not because I agreed with him, but because I could not deny it either. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew he was right, knew that some choices did not end when you walked away. They followed you. They changed you. They rewrote everything whether you were ready or not. And I exhaled slowly, my shoulders easing just slightly as I shifted my weight, accepting not the situation, but the reality of it. Then you are going to help me protect her, I said, my voice steady, leaving no room for argument. Because that was the only part of this I would not compromise on. And something changed in his expression again, subtle but real, like a line had been drawn and he had decided where he stood on it. And he nodded once, a small, decisive movement that carried more weight than any promise. I already am, he said quietly, and for a second, the words hung there, simple but heavy, and I felt that strange shift again, that pull between fear and something else, something that felt dangerously close to trust. And I looked at him, really looked this time, past the control, past the mystery, past everything I did not understand, and I realized something that made my breath catch just slightly. He had not asked to be saved, but he had not stopped me either. And now, somehow, impossibly, we were both standing on the same side of something neither of us had planned, and outside, the rain kept falling, steady and relentless, like a countdown neither of us could see. And I turned toward the window, my reflection faint in the glass, my voice softer now, but no less certain. Then we do not make mistakes, I said, and behind me, his voice came just as steady, just as certain. We do not.